From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. The Army was built to protect the Republic. Now it's being deployed to subdue it. The battlefield is no longer overseas. It's in your city. Your rights, your voice, and the military is no longer standing guard. It's standing in the way. Published August 8th, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
He used to guard the border, far from home in sight. Now he's walking through the city in the middle of the night, wearing stars and stripes like armor, but his orders ain't the same. He's not fighting foreign tyrants, now he answers to a name. He's a new American soldier, a blade drawn from within. No oath to the people, just power and the wind. From the White House to your doorstep, under orders in the dark. He's a sword for autocracy, and he's ready to leave a mark. They called it Homeland Safety, they dressed it up in pride. But mothers hold their children close when he starts to occupy. No siren, no confession, just the silence of the law. When democracy gets strangled in a soldier's martial jaw. He's a new American soldier with a mission turned around. Not to fight for freedom, but to keep the voices down. He's the armored hand of power, he's the shadow on the street. He's a weapon without conscience, marching on repeat. This ain't what the founders wrote, this ain't what the people vote. This is boots on broken trust, turning honor into dust. The generals read the memo, the governors lost the fight. The guard belongs to Washington, and justice lost the right. And when you raise your banner or you kneel upon the floor, he's a knock you never wanted, he's a steel behind the door. He's the new American soldier, forged in fear and lies, sent to guard a strong man's dream beneath these fading skies. He's not here to serve the people, he's not here to set you free. He's a sword for autocracy, and he's pointing it at me.
When a couple of wannabe carjackers punched out big balls in D.C., Trump used it as an excuse to threaten to take over the city and bring in the National Guard to police it, in a clear violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. This, despite the fact that crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low and the city already has the largest police force per capita of any municipality in America. None of that matters. Trump wants to turn America into a police state, just like every other dictator in the world does when he gets a hold of a democracy. They steal from the people, enrich their cronies, break laws with impunities, and then use police agencies to terrorize the general populace, judges, and legislators into docility and submission when they object. In fact, they told us this was their goal. They showed us. They planned it in writing. A leaked memo from inside the Department of Homeland Security reveals what many of us feared but hoped we were wrong about, that the military is no longer a last resort in American governance. It's now a first tool, a central player, a political weapon, just like in Russia. And they're not even hiding it anymore. This isn't some vague speculation or dystopian what if. This isn't a shadowy plot hatched in secrecy. The document was written, circulated, and discussed at the highest levels of Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, and it spells out in clinical, terrifying language a plan to normalize and expand the use of the United States military within our own country, on our own soil, against our own people. The memo, obtained by the New Republic, outlines a coordinated strategy to embed military forces into immigration enforcement, not just at the border, but across American cities. It calls for replicating the recent Los Angeles deployment, quote, for years to come, end quote. It uses phrases like, quote, homeland defense, end quote, and paints immigration threats as akin to Al-Qaeda or ISIS. It pushes for, quote, new ideas, end quote, on how DHS and DOD can work together on, quote, national security, end quote, threats inside the United States. This isn't about law enforcement. It's about militarization. This isn't about safety. It's about power. This isn't about stopping crime. It's about building a political machine with boots and guns that can intimidate or even subdue any opposition. And it's already happening. America is rapidly turning into an authoritarian police state. Over the past 2 months, Trump has done what no modern president has dared. He sent 4,000 National Guard troops, federalized, not state-controlled, into Los Angeles to back up ICE raids. He followed that with 700 active-duty Marines from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. These weren't weekend warriors. They were combat-trained infantry troops deployed to performatively surround federal buildings and, quote, support, end quote, immigration enforcement while pro-democracy protesters filled the streets. Marines in American cities in June and July, quote, guarding, end quote, federal offices and intimidating demonstrators. And now we've learned that smaller units have been sent to Florida, are in prepping for deployment in Texas and Louisiana. The memo wasn't a warning. It was a blueprint, a playbook for turning the world's most powerful military force inward and turning constitutionally protected First Amendment political dissent into a, quote, national security threat, end quote. Don't believe Trump's PR spin or the media's pretending this isn't as illegal and anti-democratic as it is. Don't let the uniforms fool you into thinking this is routine. This is not normal. This is not legal. This is not American. This memo, which Hegseth and his friends don't intend you and I would ever be able to read, quote, urges DHS to persuade top military brass to view immigration enforcement as a, quote, homeland defense mission, seeks to embed armed, kill-trained military personnel inside ICE and CPB to, quote, increase information sharing, end quote, and support, quote, nationwide operational planning, end quote. Frames transnational gangs and cartels as equivalent to Al-Qaeda, a dangerous, dishonest leap that pretends to justify extreme deadly force. And it admits, in its own words, that due to the, quote, sensitive nature, end quote, of the meeting, it documents, quote, minimally written policy or background, end quote, should be preserved. Translation, they know what they are doing is legally and morally criminal, so they're minimizing the paper trail. Carrie Lee, a senior fellow at German Marshall Fund, put it bluntly, quote, "This speaks to the intent to use the military within the United States at a level not seen since Japanese internment," end quote. I'd add, also not seen since the Civil War, when Americans turned their guns on each other and 700,000 of us died, and outlawed a decade after that war with the Posse Comitatus Act. And after the Kent State Massacre, we resolved, quote, "never again," end quote. Joseph Nunn at the Brennan Center warned that this could create a permanent, quote, "domestic forever war," end quote, a campaign of endless militarization justified by fear and manufactured crises. Soldiers, including armed, masked ICE agents answerable only to the president, terrifying civilians in their own streets and in their own houses, a military occupation of the United States of America. And that's exactly the point. It's all part of the classic dictator's playbook. You gin up fear about migrants and minorities. You call them invaders, terrorists, cartel assassins. You blur the line between protest and insurrection. You say cities are out of control. Then you send in the troops, not to protect, but to occupy. And you call it, quote, "national security," end quote. This isn't just Trumpism. This is textbook authoritarianism in the mold of Putin's Russia and Orban's Hungary. It embodies the early stages of all the horror stories of 1930s Europe. And let's not forget the power grab embedded in all this. When Trump federalized the California National Guard, he did it against the will of Governor Newsom. The state fought back in court. A federal judge ruled in California's favor, but the administration appealed, and for now, the troops can remain under federal control. That's not just a skirmish over a jurisdiction. That's an open attack on the sovereignty of states, the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution. That's a president saying, quote, "Your guard is my army now," end quote. This moment is a test of our Constitution, of our institutions, of our will. Because if we let this stand, if we normalize Marines in our cities, guard troops on our streets, soldiers surveilling residential communities, then we've already surrendered. What happens when the next protest erupts? What happens when a city pushes back against federal immigration policy? What happens when a journalist, a mayor, or a movement becomes, quote, "too disruptive," end quote? Do we really think they'll hesitate to send in the troops again? And what kind of soldier will say no when the DHS and DOD have spent months telling them they're defending the, quote, "homeland," end quote, against, quote, "enemy cells," end quote, within? The line between foreign combat and domestic suppression has been erased on purpose, by design. The founders of this country were obsessed with avoiding a standing army for precisely this reason. That's why they wrote the Second Amendment into the Constitution, requiring a, quote, "well-regulated militia," end quote, at the state level. And that same Constitution in Article 1, Section 7 bars Congress from appropriating money for the Army for any period longer than 2 years. Quote, "The Congress shall have the power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money shall be used for longer term than 2 years," end quote. We had seen what happened when monarchs used soldiers to police dissent. They knew the threat, not just to liberty, but to the very idea of a democratic republic. They wanted to keep the military on a very, very short leash. So they built guardrails, laws, norms, civilian command, posse comitatus, state control over guard units, strict separation between military and police roles. All of that is being unraveled right now. You may not see it in the headlines, but if you read the memos and watch the deployments, you'll see it as plain as day. The military is no longer on the sidelines. It's here. And unless we act loudly, urgently, relentlessly, it will become a permanent force in American civic life. Not a protector of freedom, but a tool of control, just like in Orban's Hungary or Putin's Russia. We are not at war with ourselves, at least yet, but our democracy is under siege, and the troops have already landed.